Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to the 8th behind-the-scenes episode of Focus Fire Chat, recorded on August 18th, 2020. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is your prepare to cut things down shorter if we need to, because this is going to be a lot deeper discussion than before. Green-eyed music lover.
AKA Shut Up Blue. As before, we like to use the behind-the-scenes series as a way to step out of the world of game lore and talk about other aspects of the community we're so proud to be a part of. This also allows us a chance to sit down and really explore a topic. So this chat will be discussing the commonly overlooked components that go into podcasting. As with the normal episodes, we will be breaking this into 2 segments or sessions, as we like to refer to them. With the intro session, our plan was to talk about some of the overarching aspects that should be considered before starting a podcast, as well as some of the hardware and software options that you have to record a podcast. In the advanced session, this session, our plan is to take a closer look at some of the challenges that we personally have faced with our own podcasting journey, as well as answering some of the amazing questions sent in by members of our community, whether that was in Discord or over on Twitter. Before we get started, just as with the intro session, I want to reiterate that there is no singular path in pursuing a creative outlet. However, if you are interested in jumping into the podcasting world, or if you just have some questions about what all happens behind the scenes, we are always more than happy to help whenever we can. Our group email is focusfirechat@gmail.com, or you can send us a message via the contact page over on www.thelorenetwork.com. With all that out of the way, let's start the chat. And I don't want to talk about this next part, but this is going to be... the challenges that we faced.
So, we've done this show for how many years?
5. 6 this October.
You've done it, I believe.
6. I will have done it 6
You've
this
done
October.
It 6. I've done it for what, 4 years?
4,
now?
I think.
It
feels longer.
It's either 4 or 5. I think I came on the year after. I know I started coming on as a guest, at least after year 1.
Yeah, because I think your guest episode was episode like 40-ish, I think.
45?
Yeah, it was. So, and I think you jumped on shortly after that, so.
Mm-hmm. We've done this for a long time. We've done a weekly show, even though it's not always been weekly. There have been times that we've taken off for various reasons, scheduling conflicts, real life things, but we've done a weekly show
as of today.
For 6 years.
As of today, right now, we have 406 published episodes. By the time this comes out, we'll have more.
400 and how many?
6.
406 episodes. That's including the 3-hour-long episodes that we used to do.
Yes.
Top 3, which were generally 30 minutes long.
Yeah. And then the other behind the scenes series, a couple of the conversations, the extra lores, the top 3, which you already mentioned, and then a couple of like the conversation streams that we had, whether that was at GCX or with like the Dames of Destiny. I put those up as episodes as well. But I mean, for the most part, that's just podcast episodes.
So we've seen some things. I think that's the easiest way to put it and the nicest way to put it. But burnout is a real thing that both you and I have experienced on multiple occasions during this adventure.
I think, and that's, you know, I think here's the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to burnout is it happens to everyone. There's no, as much as I like joke around about not wanting to talk about it, it's really, there's nothing to be ashamed about having something and being 100% passionate about it and just needing to take a step back and like just being like, I just can't even right now. Now the trick is either to try to get to a point where you're forcing yourself to kind of take a break before you hit a burnout, because like when you talk about burnout, that's like, you know, there's something to be said about like, you know, there's different degrees, I guess, of burnout because they're all kind of the same, but like you don't want to hit a burnout where it literally kills your interest in something. You can not be interested in something and take a break, but you don't want to like force yourself to do something to the point where it becomes, instead of a passion project, it becomes a punishment. And I think that's a very, you know, that is a very fine line that is very personal to every single person. You know, everyone has 100% different threshold than, you know, the next person over. A lot of things like I mean, personally, you know, I probably hit the worst burnout with podcasting last year which is when we took
November.
December. Yeah. When we took the Christmas or December off. That was the point at which I was like, I had to like seriously throw in the red flag or the white flag and be like, I have to take time off. And the silver lining for that was also the catalyst that allowed us to get ahead. So, you know, it turned out to be a good thing, but you know, it's something that I don't think a lot of people are getting more transparent about it. But a lot of people still pretend like, oh no, this is my passion project. I can go 100% 24/7, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, look, let's just call a spade a spade. It's not, you can't do that. No one can. It's not possible. You can't give 110% all the time. Like that's
right. Life isn't supposed to function that way. You're supposed to have diversity.
Right.
And once you're doing something so adamantly for so long, your body, your mind, everything bleh, you just don't want it anymore, right? So you mentioned possibly trying to preemptively take your breaks before you get to that point, right? I have a very adamant belief for me personally to get outside. So Jay knows that he probably won't find me on Monday mornings or Monday afternoons.
Sundays sometimes.
Sometimes Sundays, because I'm going to be out in the mountains. I'm going to be hiking or working out or biking or something, because that is my time for me to just wash away from it, because I don't want to be on social media, even though I end up on it anyway. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to help preventing burnout is giving yourself permission to not only have that burnout moment and say, I need a break, but also giving yourself permission to say it's okay. It's okay if I take this. And oftentimes, at least for me, once I say, hey, it's okay if I don't do this right now, but I'd like to do this. I still want to do this. I just don't need it right now. It's changing your schedule a tiny bit, possibly. If you give yourself permission, oftentimes you find that you still have the passion for it. You just needed that mental rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that's like a huge challenge for me is I don't operate mentally in a way that I do downtime. Like my brain doesn't do that. Like if I'm not actually doing like notes or, you know, any work like physically, I'm constantly thinking about how to break things down, how to evaluate different stuff. And with having done this for so long, it has become my habit to do focus fire stuff constantly. Like my brain is constantly doing that. So for me, you know, tricking my brain into thinking about something else is the biggest challenge. And it's just, you know, that's just personally, that's one of my big things. You know, that kind of comes into the next thing of like the reception or the lack thereof. You know, I'm not a super social person, but it's one of those things where no matter what content you're creating, every content creator out there is going to tell you there's a reason that the unspoken rule of the internet, the first rule is don't read the comments.
Yep.
It's because as a rule of thumb, it is significantly easier to tear people down than it is to build them up. And that's just the brutal truth of reality. People just, it's just the way it is. Which is why if you have like when you start doing if you start doing a podcast, or if you start doing YouTube, whatever you're doing, if you can find a community, or if you get a community that is supportive of you, cherish it and protect it like nothing else, because that is rare and that is worth all of your energy to protect. That is to say, you don't want to necessarily create an echo chamber, but at the same time, it's constructive criticism is always welcome, but you don't want to just get torn apart. That being said, some is better than nothing, I think, in my opinion, at least. Right.
Like, there will be trolls out there. Right. That is just a thing. But I think that specifically with podcast, not talking YouTube, not talking streaming, but specifically with podcast, because we record like this episode right here, we're not getting immediate feedback from a live audience, which is part of the reason why we do a live audience, because we do get feedback from them as we're recording. But the reception factor, when you're recording a podcast and putting it out on the internet and you don't hear anything from anyone, it's not deflating per se, but it's difficult to find the excitement, because whenever somebody takes joy in something you take joy in, that helps boost you up, right? Like, it gives you that burst of energy. And podcasting in particular is difficult to receive feedback in general. Like, not only just saying, hey guys, send us your feedback, send us your comments, let us know what you think. We say that every episode, but it's very difficult to have those people who will actually do that, because you don't think about it at the end. You don't think about, hey, I like this aspect of the show, I want to send them a note. Most people won't do that. So you're not going to get that feedback. That can be very challenging. Ways you can help mitigate that with podcasting in particular is being active other places. I'm active heavily on Twitter with a lot of our audience members. Discord is a great place for that if you have a Discord community, but talk to your community, talk to your listeners, talk to the people that you want to talk to as an audience, talk to them as people as well, because that's going to help keep that boost that you need for that little bit of, it's not an ego thing. It is literally, I want to share my passion with you, and I want you to share your passion with me, because I get the energy back.
Well, and I would say it's not, I mean, I agree. It's not an ego boost. It's a validation.
But marketing and networking. So there's a couple different reasons why your podcast may or may not be received well, right? Reception can be lack of commenters or lack of interaction with your audience members. Lack of having audience members is another thing, right? If you don't have the audience members to actually talk to, how do you do that? And that's when you start getting into the idea of marketing and networking. Blue mentioned in the intro session that having guests on can help cross-pollinate communities. Once you have your own little community, you can pollinate outside to others, as well as going out, putting yourself out there, going on other people's shows, talking to other people on social media, talking to other groups. Blue's actually better at one thing that I am terrified to do. Blue is better at talking to people who should not be talked to, in my opinion, because they are way too above me, because I have a fear of celebrity. Blue does not. I have been able to talk to Morla, the voice actress of Eris Morn. I would not have done that on my own. Blue started that. Bife is another one, actually. Bife was one that I never would have ever reached out to, and I'm still scared to this day to actually talk to him as a friend, because I'm just like, I don't know what to do. But putting yourself out there is a big way to help not only market yourself to other content creators, but also their audiences as well. Because once you start to have those conversations with them, making friends with different groups, I think the best example that we have recently is the Guardians of Lore podcast, or even Spinfoil. Spinfoil actually was came from our community group, because that was Taylor B. And then Guardians of Lore came out of nowhere. I don't remember how we got introduced to them.
I don't either. But now they're like best friends.
Yeah, I love hanging out with Oregon. Like, I will bug the snot out of her, just like her and Man at Arms. But because of that, because we talk about Guardians of Lore now, you're more likely to actually go and look up, hey, what's this podcast? Because I believe what you trust. So it's the cross-pollination. I don't know. Anyway, challenges with marketing. Consistent marketing is difficult.
Especially as a hobby on top of that. Because consistent marketing, this is where, like, I was talking in the intro session where it's like starting a podcast, it's entry cost is negligible. Marketing that's where you're going to, like, if you're wanting to kind of like push into that next tier, I guess, if you will, a lot of times people will take your pick of successful content creators, or successful podcasters, and they'll be like, oh, well, they just got lucky. It's like, I can almost 100% guarantee you that's not the case. Overnight successes are, I'm not going to say that they don't happen. They are not that common at all.
No, they're not. The thing when it comes to marketing is that the consistency is also key there.
Yes.
We talked about consistency with being on top of putting out a show. Consistency in marketing is huge, because the more excited you are about your own product, because that's what this is. It is a product you're putting out. The more excited you are about it, and the more you want to talk about it, the more excited other people will start to become on it. The flippin' queen of it, who is kind of an overnight sensation in some respects, actually works her tail off, is Issacol. I have convinced her to finally start sharing some of her secrets with me, and she has managed to just develop this marketing social media aspect that is consistent. It's not always going to be big hit tweets or anything like that, but she has managed to hype up not only her own work, but the people around her really, really well, to where other people start to get excited about it, because everybody loves the next big thing, and she makes herself that next big thing. I don't know. Hers seems very natural, but it may be a learned thing. And I think we should do a ad break
to prevent burnout.
Let's do the ad break, and then we'll do the questions from the community.
Sounds good.
Sound good? All right. We'll be right back.
Myth is a podcast about the very soul of humanity. Join me each week as I explore stories from our history, from our mythologies, about what it means to be human. I'm your host, Tom, and Myth is available on every podcatcher, anywhere. And if you're familiar with any of my other work, then you might realize that Myth is like a lorecast, but for humans. Join me each week on Myth.
Speaking about networking and marketing and everything, and having reception or feedback, or just in general, we actually had quite a bit of feedback on this topic, which kind of is exciting, because we had people from not only former guests on our show, but people who also host podcasts asked a few questions, or have been on multiple podcasts themselves. So let's kind of dive into what Jordan Joestar asked. You ready?
Yep.
This is from Discord. Of all the ways you can directly control, i.e. not word of mouth, what have you found to be the most successful way of getting the word out about your podcast while differentiating it from the minutia?
So marketing strategies. Man, that's a question that I think changes by the day. I mean, there's some, I know there's some, I mean, I will definitely defer to you on this because this is definitely more your wheelhouse, but to me, it's all smoke and mirrors. That's my understanding. I'm like, I know that green tells me to do certain things and I have no idea why, but if we do them, it works. So that's my understanding, is just listen to what green tells you to do.
Joe, don't tell people that. God, I do not want that on my conscience. But marketing strategies, we talked a little bit about consistency. Putting out something that's talking about your product fairly regularly. So on my personal Twitter, I will talk about FFC at least 2 or 3 times a week, if not daily. Like some weeks it's daily. Like there's stuff we've got going on. I'm really excited about it. I'll talk about it daily there. It's not always nitty gritty. It's not like, come listen to FFC because we're doing this and this and this. It's not an ad for the little blue pill on TV. It's not like that. It's more of, Blue and I were chatting about this today. We think it's a really good idea. We're going to give it a shot here coming up. You'll see what it is when we get to this next place. Building up that tension of, hey, there's an expectation of something new's happening. Or Blue and I had a conversation about sneaky snakes. Like you can have lighthearted conversations. It's basically presenting yourself in not only a professional manner, but also a relatable manner, because relatability is the name of the game when it comes to marketing. You want to be relatable to other people. And how do you be relatable? You share not only your own faults and your own silliness and your own goofiness, as well as the professional side. Blue and I do tend to be a little bit more stodgy compared to some podcast hosts that we are in network with. But we also put out Blue just did a little tiny finger. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. See the episode with Guardians of Lore and FFC. Oh, wait. Was there an episode?
There was not an episode that got released on that.
Actually, yeah. Those guys are fun. They're really good at just hanging out and being super, super, super fun people to be around. But marketing is just being consistent out there, being excited about your product. And you don't have to be excited about it all the time. What you can do, there's a handy website. Blue hates it to death because he hates the format of it. I use it a lot. It's called TweetDeck. TweetDeck is just a website that allows you to log into Twitter and allows you to pre-program tweets, as many as you want ahead of time. It also allows you to have multiple feeds up on that deck itself, so I can actually watch FFC feed, my personal Green Eyed Music Lover feed. I also watch the hashtag Destiny 2, so if there's any hot art or anything like that comes out with that hashtag, I will see it if I'm looking at the browser. And I also preload tweets for it. So it's a handy tool for marketing and social media in general, for Twitter specifically. Instagram, I'm not so good at, fully admit it. And Facebook can go live in a dumpster from all I care.
You're not the only one.
For those of you, I know. For those of you who love Facebook, good on you.
Good on you.
I don't know. I don't have ways to help with that because I find that Facebook is more infuriating than anything else at this point. But I'm sure there are people out there who have great ideas for it. Some of the same strategies I use for Twitter would actually work quite well for Facebook, because you're still going to put out stuff about being excited about it. That obviously not word of mouth. Word of mouth is more of, say, for instance, Spinfoil podcast says something about FFC. That would be word of mouth, that them explaining somebody else's group. But putting yourself out social media wise is a difficult thing. And the other aspect of it, you can't just put out your stuff. You have to interact with other people. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off of it, is that you forget that social media in particular is a conversation-based platform. It's not just screaming out into the void, no matter how many trolls you see do that. It is actually meant to be a conversation starter place. And so when you see other people that you find interesting, start to get to know them, start to comment on their stuff, like their things, follow their lives a little bit, and to start to develop those relationships, because those are the relationships that will help not only spread what you're excited about because they're excited about what you like, because you've been excited about what they like. So it's a give and take. Lots of give and take in psychology involved. And I'm not going to talk about this forever. So let's move on to the next question. Blue?
All right.
Do you want to read that one?
Yeah, so this is a good one. This is from Wet Chinchilla. Actually, Wet Chinchilla sent in a couple really good ones. But the first one they sent in was, how space and time intensive is it to get good audio equipment for a podcast? Not necessarily talking about expenses, although I imagine those are a factor as well, but I imagine the better your audio quality is, the more intense your setup has to be. Short answer is not really. Because this is the thing, is you kind of have a boon in the way that podcasting as a whole is processed behind the scenes. Green and I were talking about this a little bit off air quotes, before we started recording, about the microphones that, like, the microphone that I use is an ATR 2100. It's a USB microphone, but it has the capability of having an XLR connection. If none of that made any sense, don't worry. It's basically talking about the cords that you use to connect to capture the audio that you're listening to right now. A lot of microphones that do podcasts, you're going to be surprised. A lot of them are going to be USB microphones. And the reason why is XLR is going to give you a much higher quality audio. Yes. However, when you convert it to a podcast format, you have to drum down the file type to an MP3. The audio difference between an XLR and a USB connection, for the most part, you're not going to notice that with when it hits MP3 level, like compression rates and everything. It's just, they're not going to be noticeable.
For spoken word.
Yeah,
clarify that. For spoken word.
Yeah, like if you're doing music or if you're doing instruments and stuff like that, it will be noticeable a little bit, especially if you start doing like MP4s. That format is going to catch up on those. But for a lot of podcast apps, they require it to be MP3, which is an older form of the file, and it's a lower
resolution.
Resolution, I guess, would be the best. Yeah. So really what you want to do is you want to focus on not necessarily top of the line audio equipment, but you want to make sure that, you have a space that is conducive to good sound. So you want to be in a quiet space. If you have the capacity to put up some soundproofing, and some rooms need it. Like if you have a room that has a lot of hard walls in it, soundproofing might help with what's called audio bounce back and that echoing sound. Or you can do it in post edits. Like, we kind of talked about a couple of the softwares in the intro session that you can use to that. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, you don't have to have like a recording studio to have a good sounding podcast. Mm-mm. I mean, I don't. I'm recording in my office.
I mean, Mylan has a box that he puts himself in.
That's very true.
But even that, like, you don't even have to have something like that. You can have sound dampening equipment. Does not have to be high tech.
Nope.
I have all homemade stuff in my place. I have a large amount of curtains that take up an entire wall. Mm-hmm. Curtains are great at diffusing sound.
Quilts are too.
And then I've also, what's that?
Quilts are really good at dampening sounds.
Mm-hmm. Tapestries, not so much, because they tend to be thinner. Mm-hmm. You want something with a little bit of weight to it to help take up that sound a little bit. The other thing, carpets on the floor. If you have hardwood floors, put a carpet down. Even if it's just a small one, it will help tremendously. I do have sound boards that I made that are essentially canvases, blank canvases that have towels shoved inside the space where the frame essentially goes for the canvas, and then I stapled cloth over the top of it. So they're sound dampening boards that are just basically a bunch of cloth put together on a wall. And they're decorative. You'll see them in the back of my setup whenever we do live streams. I have a lot of different pins and stuff hanging from them. And those are all meant to help sound dampening, just because my room that I work in specifically is very live. It's very,
really
live or wet.
Another really cheap trick if you need like severe sound dampening is go record in a closet. Like
lots of people do that.
Lance Zavala, the voice actor for Zavala, that's what his at-home studio. He'll be in the closet, like he is in a closet, and he has that on Twitter. And it's exactly kind of what Green was just saying. It's because all the clothes are compressed and around you. There's nowhere for sound to really bounce. It all gets absorbed into all that.
It dries it out. That's a good question, though. So, how do you learn how to speak for radio? Like not speaking so fast, making sure not to mumble, enunciate, just learning those habits. That's another question from Wet Chinchilla.
I have no idea.
I think both you and I have a slight advantage with the fact that we're from the Midwest. Did you know that the Midwestern accent is considered newsworthy? That they actually encourage people who are going into broadcasting to use a more Midwest accent because it's very neutral.
That's interesting. I mean, it
I had a friend who went into it.
Makes sense. Like, it does make sense. I think for me, like learning how to speak, the biggest challenge for me is figuring out a way to tell myself to shut up when someone else is trying to talk. Because I mean, so like personally, I'm not like I don't like if I ever meet you in person, I'm not going to be a chatterbox. I don't talk a lot. But with podcasting, it's like the only way to communicate is verbally. And we're talking about something that, quite honestly, I'm usually pretty passionate about. So I have a lot of thoughts on stuff, and I just want to share those thoughts. It's not meant, like, I don't mean it to be offensive when I cut people off. So like for what we do, with like either via the face cams help, because you actually have that, the visual component of seeing someone being like, kind of, they energize right before they have an idea. The other thing that we've done before is in our text chat, we'll have like a little symbol, or we usually use like the letter N, for next. And, that kind of just is like queuing up to say, hey, I have something real quick. About mumbling and enunciating.
A really good way to practice this, and this is actually more of a voice actor / vocal, like singer type thing, is to read aloud. If you want to be extra picky, read and record it, because you will find so many things that you just let slip by. I record Destiny Lore audio file, and I'm not somebody who can record in a single take. I will not let the audio record the entire time. I will be there and I'll start the recording and I will read 5 words, and then I will find something that Seth wrote that I have to look up on Google. And then I have to go and learn how to say it, and then I have to practice it, and then I have to go back in and then re-record. So learning how to read aloud helps if you are a constant mumbler and you're worried about certain words. But honestly, when it comes to speaking too fast, is you have to remember that it is a conversation. You have to leave natural pauses for people to actually understand what you're saying. Because if you continually speak in a stream of consciousness so quickly, no one will have a chance to finalize what your thought is. Because pauses are basically the processing point in your brain that allows you to say, that's what they meant. Shink. And then we move on. So remember that it's a conversation between you and the other person who is not actually able to talk to you, but they're there nonetheless. How do you balance the podcast workload and needs with your professional lives, as well as your personal lives at home?
I don't know.
chinchilla.
I have no idea. This is
Blue doesn't sleep. That's how he does it.
I think the funny thing is, this reminds me of back when I was in college. One of the first things that we were given, like as freshmen, was they drew a thing on the wall and it was like, here's your options. You have 4 choices. You can sleep, you can study, you can socialize, and you can sleep, study, socialize, and something else. Like I can't remember what the God, what was it? It was something, but like you can only choose 3. Like you can only choose 3, and it was like that was, and that choice has like always, every time I do something in life, that's what pops in my head. I'm like, yep, sleep's gone. Like amp up on the coffee because I gotta get other stuff done. But to be completely honest, it's something that you have to have that balance within, like everyone's balance is different. Like I will hit points where it's like, look, I have to, Green was talking about, with the burnout, like every Monday morning she goes to walk. There's points where my son is getting ready to go into 2nd grade. So when certain things happen, like, football practice, scouts, all these things, there are certain periods in time where like I will have my phone if an emergency happens, but to be honest, for the podcast component, that's not good. I mean, there's not going to be an air quote emergency. My professional situation is such that like I'm pretty much on call 24/7 because that's that's just the way it is. And really, honestly, that's not a big deal because a large majority of the fires that we have to put out happen during the workday, There's been a few times where it came down to like literally, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I literally had 15 minutes from the time I stopped working to the time that we started recording. That was probably the only time that I've had it really close, like really close.
I think that for me in particular, I try to preemptively schedule things. Personal life especially. Julie and I have, for a large portion of the time that I've been on the show for Focus Fire Chat, we have had a established date night because I record on Friday night. So I have not had a Friday night date in a few years, but Wednesday nights are her night, and I make a point to put down my phone and I put down everything else, and I make sure to make that happen because quality time is way more important when it comes to personal life than it is to be on top of the podcast all the time or have my phone up and checking social media all the time because I don't want to miss something. For me, I made that a priority. When it comes to balancing the other aspects of it, because I have a work ethic that is not sit down and grind it out all at once. I am somebody who will work. I have a schedule. I have a notepad thing on my phone that asks me to work on DLA an hour a day, Focus Fire Chat an hour a day. And I find that if I do at least an hour a day, and sometimes I end up working on it longer if I get on a roll, but if I do at least an hour a day, I can manage the rest of my time much more easily because I don't feel like I'm left something behind that I needed to get done. I've checked up on what I need to focus on, and then I can balance it out that way and still have playing time. And I often will play and work on FFC stuff at the same time.
Yeah, I think scheduling for me is definitely a big part too. Like I have a calendar, like a paper pencil calendar that I have pretty much my week scheduled out. And that definitely, I mean, by no means do I always keep to it, but it definitely gives me a guide of like, this is what I need to do today, or this is what I need to do this week. I think the other thing is like, as Green kind of, you probably picked up on with what Green was just saying, is both of us have the expectation that the podcast is important to us, but it is not more important than personal, family life, or even professional. Like if something were to happen, I have always had the opinion, even before Green was on Focus Fire, when it was Justin and Willie and myself, we we all agreed when we started this that, there are no hard feelings if someone had to step aside because of personal, situation, which is exactly what has happened over the time with the changing and the hosts that we've had, is that, there was personal stuff that came up and they just had to step aside. There's no hard feelings. And I think that's important for any podcast or any creative team to kind of, I think it's a non-negotiable fact. That is obviously different for everyone, depending on the seriousness in which this could be your professional life, that in that case, sure. But for me, since it's not, to me, it's a hobby. And as such, I need to treat it with the priority that a hobby dictates, and that is below those two. So I think, as long as everyone on the team has that clear understanding that that's where that falls, I don't think anything will, it's been very easy because we've always had that approach to it. So
family first, always family first. So to move on to a different question, Nero asked the rundown on various types of equipment used or have found helpful in production. We primarily went over that in the introduction episode, but a real quick recap is things that you have to have for a podcast: a PC or a laptop and a mic.
Patience.
Software. We use Audacity. You do not have to. There's lots of different audio softwares out there. We also use Voice Meter Potato. You probably shouldn't, to save yourself the pain and hassle. It is anyway. It's funny. It's a great.
She has a love-hate relationship that's kind of more on the hate relationship.
I tried to help Man at Arms set his up, and then I rage quit again.
Like, unless I trust the person enough to I agree 100% with Pens on this particular thing. It's like, this is one of the programs that if you are like, if I get asked to help, I'm like, can I remote into your computer? Because to be 100% honest, it's next to impossible to explain via even shared screen. It's really difficult. There is one program that, especially if you're going to be doing editing and producing on your own side, there is one program I forgot to mention in the intro session, and that is a program called MP3 Tag. What that program does is it actually, when you get all done with it and you have it all ready to go, and you have it as an MP3 file from Audacity, you can drag the MP3 file over into this program, and it will actually help. There's these things called ID3 tags inside the file, and that's what's actually used by Google, by iTunes, by all these different software or all these different programs and logarithms to track and help search engine optimization with those particular files. MP3 Tag is the program that it's free, and it actually opens up the MP3 files and allows you to configure them right there. That's how, when you download Focus Fire Chat, and if you have it on a Podbean player or podcast player, and it will automatically put up the thumbnail while you're playing it, it's because I've actually embedded that picture inside the MP3. So there's nice little programs like that we use also to kind of make it just a little bit more polished.
Hypersyntax asks, coordinating with guests in different time zones, how do you go about finding a mutual time to record? This one is a challenge. Blue and I, because we do a live recording, we often will, if the guest is willing, if they're not in some crazy location in the world like Europe, because that's a crazy location, we will ask them to accommodate us and come in at our normal time. But we have on many occasions rescheduled when we record with people, and there's a website that will do not only your time zone, but you put in their location and it'll give you their time zone, and you can set a future time based off of your time, and it'll tell you what time it is for them. I'm sure there's multiple websites that do this, but that sounds way more convoluted the way I said it. But honestly, it's just working with the person that you're wanting on as a guest. Blue and I have recorded on multiple Sundays. We've even recorded on Saturdays. My least favorite time to record that we've done before is for the QLRs because somebody has to live on the other side of the world, and I have to get up quite early for those, even though he's up quite late. But yeah, no, sometimes it's just...
That was the best conversation.
Oh my gosh.
He was so tired. Everyone was so tired.
Everyone was so tired.
Oh,
I think hardly
really
there for that
also,
mentally.
Kind of what you're saying too is just like, if you have, gauge how much you want the guest on, because honestly, it's the guests should have, you want to make it as easy as possible for your guest to be on. So if you're not live streaming, if you're doing offline, or if you're doing an off-air recording, my approach has always been kind of like, well, when would be convenient for you? Because, I want to make it easy for you, because that will make you happier to be on, will make it a more pleasant experience for you, and also will make you more likely to say yes. is the trifecta in my approach to that.
I think barring you get into trouble of what time you actually end up scheduling, with that option of saying, when are you available, or when can you do this, or when would you like to do this, I have on multiple occasions with various guests offered them multiple times. Yeah. Saying that I have these times open. Let me know if one of them works for you. And that ends up actually working. I generally throw out 3 different times. 9 times out of 10, one of those 3 things will work. Or one of those 3 times will work. I do this as well with scheduling guests out in advance. Like, I will schedule 6 months in advance for FFC. I need to actually start looking at doing that again online. But I will put out a call saying, if you want to be on, great, let me know, message me. And I will put as many guests as I can into my schedule for the next 6 to 9 months, depending on how much interest we have. And I will remind you as we get closer. But once we hit that 1 month, the month mark, if I don't hear back from you, and I don't hear back from you 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 1 week, I don't worry about it. Blue and I can handle doing a show on our own without the guest on there. But there's only so much you can do to accommodate a guest when they want to come on. And it's balancing out what you can offer with what they can do. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, this one is a question for you specifically, because I don't want to answer it. Wicked Jester asks, how do you go about registration with hosting platforms, getting the podcast to show up on different platforms / providers? Blue, how do we do that?
Well, I will be honest. It's a lot easier than it used to be. The big secret, or the big one that I would say you want to get on as soon as possible. Once you pick out where you're going to host. So, we prefer, or I prefer Podbean, because simply we have been with Podbean for the entirety of our podcasting career, air quotes around career. And I have always had a good rapport with just their tech side. Their customer service has always been very professional. Very quick to help us. So I've always stuck with them. Podbean makes it really easy to send across files to all of the big name platforms. The biggest one that you want to go after, and this annoys me because I absolutely can't stand Apple products just personally, but it's iTunes. iTunes is going to be the if you will, meat of every platform, because basically what's going to happen is once you have your podcast on iTunes, what it's going to do is there is, Anchor, take your pick. There's so many podcasting apps out there now. They all scrape off of iTunes. So basically, you put it on iTunes, and then your podcast will start popping up on all these other sites. Now, there's a few exceptions. Those exceptions would be Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, I think, is the other one. And I think those are the big four. Each of those have different requirements. They have changed slightly. I know with Spotify, you have to have a minimum of 5 episodes. Each one of them will also have file requirements. Usually it's MP3, and basically if you can upload it to Podbean, it's going to be fine because it'll port over without a hitch. But you always just look at the requirements. They're usually right there when you click on it, especially within Podbean, because it takes you right to the share link page. Spotify has a specific requirement of there has to be 5 episodes before they will air quote consider it. If you're on Podbean, you kind of get a little bit of a boost in the waiting queue because they have a pre-existing agreement with Spotify. Pandora is you can submit it for consideration. It's basically, they just look to make sure that you're not, just a fly by night thing. Same with Google Podcast and with Stitcher. They're all very easy to set up. And again, with Podbean, once you set them up, you'll have to create a user account with them. They're all free user accounts because basically the reason why you have to have a user account is so that you can then claim, air quote, your podcast feed. Once you have all that set up, really honestly, whatever system you have hosting those files, they're going to ask for what's called an RSS feed. Once you provide that, it's a URL. Once you provide that URL to those different platforms, that's it. Because as soon as you publish on your hosting, basically what happens is you push that file to the public, and then the hosting site will send out a notice to the RSS feed, and that RSS feed is going to distribute the file to all the different podcast platforms providers that you have set up. The big one, again, is iTunes. If you get your stuff on iTunes as quickly as you can, because iTunes is going to then further push out, because most of the podcast apps out there basically scrape it from iTunes and display it that way. That's why whenever you hear podcasts asking for reviews, the 9 times out of 10, they're going to ask for reviews on iTunes. They'll usually throw in a caveat of, or wherever you listen to. But really, a lot of iTunes reviews are where a lot of those logarithms for the search engine optimizations, the front page, air quote, the new and upcoming podcast determinations, that's what drives those decisions, is those number of reviews on iTunes. Now, obviously, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pandora, and the others, they have a different a logarithm, but because I want to say it's 90% of your consumption is going to be through iTunes, and so really that's really the brunt of where you should focus. Most of your, again, I can speak for Podbean. Podbean has a built-in analytics that will actually let you break down your consumption per episode, so you can see what app took the most downloads, how much of each episode was listened to in that app, what geographical area the app was used to capture it. So, we personally with Focus Fire, we are predominantly consumed within the United States. Host of reasons for that. We're based in the United States. There's different podcasting app storefronts for different regions, and so if you specify within your podcast that you're predominantly hosted in the United States, it's going to put a different listing in the US version of iTunes than it will put in the EU or the Australian or the Middle Eastern versions of those storefronts. That's going to be different. So there's a lot of different little considerations to play with, but really honestly, with registration for hosting platforms, look at wherever you sign up, whether it's Podbean, whether it's Anchor, Stitcher, I think Pinecast is the other one that I've seen out there. wherever those are, they will usually, if they are an actual hosting site, they will have a point where it's like it's usually like social share or distribution or something like that. Inside there, that is going to be where you can find places to put your ID key, which you'll get when you sign up for different providers. But once all that gets done, the thing is once you set it up, really it's done.
You don't have to touch it again.
Yeah, unless something changes on one side, and then usually it's just a matter of refreshing it.
Huh. Hey, I'm Dead Again, aka Cam.
Still love that.
Did you guys have a community before the podcast that you were able to sort of advertise to and then grow it with the podcast, or did you build one with the podcast? I think this one's a fairly easy answer, since you came from DoD and FFC originally was a DoD.
Well, FFC, so
semi sort of,
yeah,
not necessarily. Well, like everybody on FFC originally was from DoD.
Yeah. The DoD podcast was different. So the FFC podcast was because the DoD administrative chat got tired of us talking about lore all the time, and they kicked us out. They told us that we weren't allowed to talk about lore in their in their chat. So we created the FFC chat because we weren't allowed to talk about it anywhere else. The DoD podcast was one that, because we started to Focus Fire Chat and we were doing pretty well with that podcast, they brought me on to help them start up the DoD podcast, which I think they still have going over there.
They do.
I don't know. I'm not sure who's running it now.
It's changed hosts.
Yeah, it's changed hosts a couple of times.
I actually hung out with them on one of their shows.
Oh, okay.
About 2 months ago.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Because I know, and we inherited it from, what was it? Pope Bear, I think, was the one that I still talk to somewhat regular. He's with DCP now. But he was originally, way back, he was one of the original hosts for the original DoD podcast that we inherited and took on. And then that whole, so that was again, so we started off, we kind of had a community. We had a community insofar as we were kind of the melting pot point for a lot of the different communities at that time within the Destiny community, for people who were looking for family centered clans. And so then when we found people who were into lore, we kind of synergized that interest there. And then of course, once the podcast was started officially, then that translated into, we already had a small group there, so it just kind of grew.
All right, this is the question you've been dying to get to, and I'm sure he has been dying for you to get to as well. Taylor B. at the Spinfoil Podcast asks, what do you use as a master backup for when someone's audio didn't take and I embarrass myself?
So Green mentioned we record, everyone records their own on Audacity. I will generally also have a separate recording running on Voicemeeter. And then as a tertiary backup, usually especially if we're live streaming, there is always the live stream archive as well. I really don't I've had to use that once, and it's a giant pain because, like we had talked about with the audio splits, there's notifications that go off in that. So there's it's a lot extra editing, but you can make it work. The benefit to having on-site recordings is I don't have to worry about the internet cutting out. But I will be honest, I'd rather have someone go slightly robo voice and have a podcast to distribute than have nothing to send out. So as far as my first layer is the on-site recordings for each of the hosts or the co-hosts. The first backup is through Voicemeeter, and then the backup of that backup would be usually with Streamlabs OBS.
I think at some point, not during this episode, but coming up with something to describe how you do the Voicemeeter pool create this. The secondary backup would be a good thing to go into, because I've had multiple podcasters ask me that of how does he do that, because I don't know. It's magic and Voicemeeter banana.
Yeah, it's there's an option in Voicemeeter called tape recorder, and you can it's actually not as complicated. Like if you can get Voicemeeter set up, you can totally do this. I'll just put it that way. It's actually pretty, like once you figure out where the menu is in Voicemeeter, which that is the biggest challenge, is figuring out what menu you want. Like with Voicemeeter banana, I think Potato has the same lookout, but there's that little tape recorder up on the top right that actually is determining what is getting recorded in it. And so I can probably put together a quick slideshow of that even. But
nice.
Yeah, it's I think it's called tape recorder options. And then once you hit record on the tape recorder, based on what inputs you've recorded, it will actually create a multi-track output for that recording session, which is really nice actually, because what that translates into is I have it set up where when I record in Voicemeeter, my audio is its own track. And then whoever I have on what I have as my VoIP, which is the voice over internet provider, or voice over internet protocol, or Skype, Discord, whatever you want to call it, that is its own track. And then I actually have it where if I was playing a video game or playing something on a third track, it will come in also on its own track as well. Now, the only downside to this is if I have more than one guest on my VoIP, they will not be on separate tracks. They will be on the same track. But again, as a backup, it serves a purpose really well. And it's also clean, because then I don't have to worry about the notifications that I have to worry about within the Streamlabs OBS. But yeah, so that's where, again, Voicemeeter, I really, really suggest if you're looking to get into like the little bit more nitty gritty setups, I think Voicemeter is it's 100% worth the time to get it set up, because it will save you so much frustration in my as much frustration as it is to get it set up. It is worth it in the end, I think. For that, I mean, just that alone makes it worth it.
Yeep. Parody on Twitter. Last minute questions that came in today. Is it worth giving up the Blue Yeti microphone for something that's not a condenser mic? I think we kind of talked about that a little bit in the intro episode, but the short answer is if it's something you want, you can make it work.
Yeah.
Long answer is
just know how your mic works. Like that's the thing.
That's
take the time and sit down and really either find someone, like what I did when I first started out. I was lucky enough to have a co-host of the DoD podcast, Kai Kunis, who was an actual audio technician. And he's the one who told me to get the microphone that I have is the ATR 2100. It's a Cardioid dynamic mic. And basically he was the one, he was like, this is the one you should get. It was like $80, totally worth it. I would say either find someone who knows what they're talking about, or sit down and just go to YouTube. I know one of the guys that does a lot of like podcasting stuff is Pat Flynn. He does a huge amount of different things. He has a lot of YouTube videos that actually do comparisons of different mics. But yeah, I mean, you'll find tons of YouTube videos on different mics. But the other thing is once you decide if you want to do a Blue Yeti, I mean, Yetis are fine. Other benefit, I'm just going to keep plugging Voicemeeter here, because this is one of the yet another benefit is they have what's called an IntelliPan on Voicemeeter. I can actually, and I've proven this, I can record everything that you're hearing right now. I could be recording on an Astro's A40 with that little microphone, and with the IntelliPan I can make it sound just like my microphone does right now. It takes a little bit extra work. It takes a little extra work, but you can make any microphone sound good if you just take a bit of time and actually just test it out.
If you know the tools, if you know the settings, because not only the tools, like Voicemeeter potato or banana is well and good, but also knowing how your microphone interacts with your PC.
Yep.
Because of the sounds, like the sound input.
Yeah, your gate.
Basically, if you're not careful, your Blue Yeti is going to pick up the fart in the next room that your spouse had because it's so hot. Like, it's a very, very active mic. But there are things you can do on your PC to turn down essentially the gain through a digital way that will help cut that out. It will reduce that amount of sound without reducing the quality of voice that's coming through. So definitely learn and play around with it. Ask questions. Ask people who use microphones. I use a Blue Yeti. I enjoy my Blue Yeti.
Oh, everyone that I've talked to, everyone who I've talked to that has a Blue Yeti they love it. I mean, I think you use two different ones, don't you? Because you're using the Nano now.
Mm-hmm. The Nano is most of the time it's my PS4 mic, because I don't use a traditional headset when I'm playing PS4, because I like to port my audio from PS4 into my PC and then out through the audio jack that way, because I like to play Spotify without having to turn off certain functions on PS4. But I have one for a PS4 that I can use as a travel mic that I'm using tonight, and then I have my nicer, heavier one.
Right.
They both sound just as good, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think it all comes back to, what do you prefer? And I think that ties into like the next question from Parody here is, what about the physical location where you record? Do you do anything to dampen the echo or make the room more like a coat closet? We were kind of talking about that a little bit earlier. I don't do anything, but the room that I'm in has so many computer components around me that there's not really anything. There's not a space that I could probably put a dampener on, just to be honest.
The thing is, though, with your space, you do have a lot of bookshelves behind you, which would help. But honestly, if you're having trouble with having a lot of background noise perk up, I would bet probably 9 to 10 that you are actually dealing with a settings problem more so than a space problem.
Yeah.
Because you can do a lot of, if you are really, really like, I want an extra dry sound because I want this recording to be done so cleanly, you can I have literally taken a pillow and put it over my monitor and recorded it into a mic.
Yeah. I know if I turn my gate off, I have crazy background noise. But I have the gate set pretty. I mean, it's not like super high, but I mean, it's present, and that was one of the first things that I started playing around with when I first got this mic, was because it was so much more because it was such a better mic than your standard laptop mic. It's like, it was a huge step up, and so one of the things is it's also a lot sensitive. It's a lot more sensitive, so that kind of ties in.
Gate is essentially...
Yes.
What it does is it takes the audio that it's coming into the PC and it puts a level that it won't register it at until it hits a certain decibel level. So it's literally a gate that your voice has to break through in order to be recorded or to be even heard through the other side. Voice Meter, again, does that. I don't know of any other ones at the moment who do that.
I don't... Does Audacity have a gate in it? I don't know if you can. I think you might be able to put an artificial gate in it.
But I've not played with it enough to really feel comfortable with it, because I prefer to deal with not altering it in Audacity because of the way it records things.
Right. I know the other thing, real quick, for that is because for me, because I have my gate set at a pretty strong level, I really have to have a pop filter on my mic, because in order for me to hit that gate, I have to get some sound going. A pop filter is usually, literally it's, I don't know, the best I can explain. I was like to say, I think it's pantyhose. I really think it's just pantyhose. But it's usually just like or you can also get them usually in a big ball if you have like a traditional mic. It's that big foam thing that goes over it. And all that does is keep you from breathing, because usually if you're speaking into a mic, it feels like your mic is in your mouth. a pop filter helps with your P's and your hard S's and T's, but it also helps the breathing. That's the big thing for me, is because the mic is so close to my face, just breathing, I don't want that to activate the audio.
Mm-hmm. What do you wish you knew when you started or learned far too late?
I don't know. Like, I mean, here's the thing, is this is going to tie into the next question that he has. It's like, for me, I don't think I learned anything far too late. I don't think I wish any different things, to be honest. To me, the part that has made it such an enjoyable experience is actually the learning as I went through it. I mean, like, sure, there's some components behind the scenes for like editing, like MP3 tags and, you know, all the like technical stuff that were a pain to learn. But I think that pain of learning has made me more appreciative of doing them correctly. So I think, you know, I don't know. That's a tough question, because I think part of it is like the journey to get to where we are, you know, and I mean, I think that's why I love it so much, is because it's one of the few things that is constantly evolving. There is something that you constantly can, you're constantly being faced with something that you need to figure out for yourself.
Right.
That's, to me, that's why it's so addictive. Is because that's where my brain goes into hyperdrive, because it allows me to just focus on, you know, how do I translate my podcast to a YouTube video? It's just, there's constantly things going on where it's like, I don't know, let's figure it out. Let's go get Blender and see what we can figure out. That's the weirdest program ever. And I think I finally figured it out the other day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's still a pain, but I mean, it's still a pain. But I mean, the thing is like that kind of never ending challenge of, hey, do you want to do this better? To me, that's really the allure of it. So I don't know, like, what do you wish you knew when you started? I mean, have patience, like be aware that you're gonna run into walls that are gonna take more energy than you think to get over.
Also, I think one of the things that I remember feeling very distinctly the first time I guest spot on FFC is that I had it in my head that I had to be absolutely perfect, that I had to have every answer to any question that you presented, or had to have the information so well under my belt that I would be the expert. And the funny thing about FFC, and the funny thing about this podcast in particular, is that because we do things as a live recording, we do edit some things out, but there's a lot that stays in that just makes it to your guys' feeds that probably shouldn't. Because I will say something dumb, or you'll say something dumb, or
I mean, that's the thing, is like I chuckle when you say that, because actually that's what a lot of people who come on the show as guests say, that same thing. And I've never felt like, I know, like, I try to keep my information updated, and I feel like an idiot if I do something, like if I say something really dumb. But at the same time, I will be honest, starting the show with Justin, we never worried about having everything perfect. We were happy to get here on time. Like, you know, it was always like, we always, from the get-go with our show especially, we would prefer everyone have a good time rather than everyone be 100% accurate. Because to us, that was more important.
I think that's honestly the biggest thing that I would say for anybody starting, is that don't get so hung up on being perfect.
Yeah.
Don't get so hung up on the production value of the piece. Put something out there that you can be proud of, but don't kill yourself to get it out there. If you convince yourself that you won't put it out there until it's perfect, it's never going to get put out there.
Exactly.
Try things, learn things.
Yeah, and that's one of the things Green and I were talking about right before we started recording this particular session, is like editing. You know, because I edit all the podcasts, I've gotten to a point where, like, when I'm editing, I have reached a point where I will listen with, like, 60 to 75% attention on what I'm listening to, because I have in my head already, I know the big points that I think I'm going to need to edit. So everything else is really just, making sure, like we've said in the intro session, I try to run a PG show. Every now and then I'll miss something, and believe me, I get notified of it really quickly, and it's usually just kind of like, hey, just a heads up, you missed this one. It hasn't happened in a while, so it probably will happen soon, because that's Murphy's Law. But, like, I have honestly found with me, it's easier for me to edit when I'm doing something that, like, I'll do, like, cross-stitching, or I'll do something at work that, is just like coding that doesn't take a lot of energy. Doing something while I'm editing helps me, because I'll get through the editing process and it's good enough, because my brain is OCD. My brain wants things to be perfect. So I basically trick myself into thinking, oh yeah, it's fine. And that's where you got it. You kind of just have to accept you're not going to have a perfect product. It's better to get it out there. It's
actually an old theater trick. So when you're on stage in theater, you have the 5-foot rule, you have a 10-foot rule. Do you know what those are?
Kind of.
So your costume on stage should look what the audience expects it to look like from 5 to 10 feet away. But if you got up close, you'll see that things may not be sewn together. It may be Velcro. It may also be crayon, for all we know. But as long as it looks good from 5 to 10 feet away, it's going to pass for a theater. And that is a very common thing that a lot of people forget, that when listeners listen to your production, they're hearing it for the first time. They're not also listening to it with as critical of an ear as you will. So you have to remember that
you are your own worst critic most of the time.
Yes, absolutely. And you will go back and re-edit the same
No, I don't.
Phrase.
I don't ever do that.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you how long it took to record the Maracena.
Oh God. Yeah.
We should wrap up this episode and say goodnight.
No, I mean, really, like, shout out concluding thoughts. I mean, I think that last part is really the thing that, if anything, just start. Like, just start. A lot of times when I've talked to the couple people, or the few people that I've talked to about doing podcasts, a lot of times they'll be like, well, it's just too much work. I'm like, it doesn't have to be. I'm like, I know, like, you're talking to me who has been doing this for nearly 6 years now. Like, my process is going to be night and day different from your process when you're looking at just starting. My process is built on 5 or 6 years of, to be honest, complete F-ups that I have learned from. And, like, I can give you tips, I can give you tricks, I can walk you through my process, but I guarantee you my process will overwhelm you for the most part, unless you have, like, professional training, and you probably are going to not be talking to me at that point. But, I mean, like, when people talk to me, I have to hold back, because I don't want to scare people. Because for me, a passion project is all immersive. I'm in it 100%. I'm all in. So, like, my process is reflective of that. I know a lot of people who do podcasts who are successful podcasters who do nowhere near the amount of work as far as, like, the post-production editing piece that we do. And that is, I mean, like I said at the beginning, there are different roads to getting content created. There's no right or wrong answer here. And that's what you have to, that's like the biggest takeaway, is just start. Do it, see what happens, and learn from it. And that's really going to be the best teacher, is just experience. And, I mean, again, like we said at the beginning, if you have questions, if you want feedback, please let us know. I'm more than happy. You send me a clipping of a podcast that you want to put out there, I will be more than happy to give you back my thoughts. they will be honest thoughts. And I will probably point out really random things like audio levels and stuff like that. But, I mean, to me, that would be the exact type of stuff that I would like to hear back from. Like, if I sent a clip to somebody, I want to hear back, okay, well, tweak this a little bit, or maybe make this, you know, a little bit faster, or your pauses are too long here. You know, that's the type of stuff that, to me, help. But, yeah, I mean, I think just starting is the biggest hurdle for most people when it comes to not just podcasting, just to content creation in general.
Starting and not being afraid to talk to people.
Because most of us are right there in the same boat.
Yeah, not being afraid to talk to Bife.
Yeah, well, I mean more of like, most of us are like,
right,
I don't know, like, let's figure it out. Like, you know, it's like, that's the number one conversation response that I have is like, I have never thought about that. But I am more than happy to sit down and figure it out, because it's through those type of conversations that everyone gets better at what we do. So, yep. Got any final kernels of wisdom or shout out, Screen?
I think my final shout out is to Ja Love, who is behind me with his bone and has waited the entire.
Has he been standing there the entire time?
He hasn't been standing here. He's been in the room with me, but he just now picked up his bone to start chewing on it that I can hear through my headset. You may or may not be able to hear it through the audio. If you can. I'm sorry.
He's been a good boy up until now.
Check your settings. Yeah, he's been a real good boy. He's been real quiet. I haven't had the cat meowing the whole time. I've been all for it. So shout out to this dog right behind me, because he is a cool cat. I mean dog.
Well,
but no, on a more serious note, shout out to you for being willing to put up with me for this long, and we learn together. We struggle together. We learn together. We make it work.
Right back at you. I mean, that's the thing is, you know, get a team. I can't imagine doing a podcast by myself. That to me sounds terrifying. I know people do it, but I can't imagine that. So yeah, I mean, it's God, man. Anyways, thank you for your time, and until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer. Stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusedFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusedfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.